Welcome to episode 232 of the Various Sundry Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio, the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary, by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who has recently taken up raising kittens.
Oh, gosh.
John Scott Sloat.
Yeah. Had 5 of them, 5 we think, only, born in a woodpile behind my house. So they're present.
Yes, and you're lacking a game plan for addressing this situation.
I am. I reached out to a farmish person to see if they want to come get them.
A farm-adjacent person, perhaps?
Yeah. I mean, I think lives on a farm. It's small. He doesn't – more a couple of pigs, a couple of cows. It's farm-ish.
Okay.
But if anybody wants 5 kittens, I'm reaching out to the Humane Society. Probably before this airs, so too late. But they're gosh darn cute kittens. I will say. I mean, it's hard to beat the cuteness of a kitten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just
saying.
Yeah, this could be your gateway drug into cat videos on the internet.
I don't know. A couple people have mentioned to me the Cat Distribution Network. Have you heard of this?
No.
Yeah. Like there's a thing called the Cat Distribution Network where it finds people lacking cats and providing them with cats. And so my wife made the comment, somebody in my office made the comment to me, oh, the Cat Distribution Network saw that you were deficient and gave you cats. Regardless of whether I wanted cats, this oppressive regime of distribution has provided me with cats.
Okay. Huh. Yeah. Well, if you'd like to contact the show and see if John has any kittens left, you can find us on Twitter at VNSPod. You can email the show, varioussunderpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, and we would love for you to leave a 5-star rating on whichever platform you access the show. All right, John, let's talk a little sports, a little slower.
We skipped last week's sports pretty much.
Yeah, we did. Well, we had a very full episode last week.
We did.
Even with a very abbreviated sports segment, we were still pushing, 50, 55, something
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, sports. NBA playoffs. The finals are underway, and Celtics lead 2-0. Have you seen any of the 2 games so far?
Nah.
Okay.
Not interested.
Okay. The Celtics have looked dominant in both of those games.
That surprises me zero.
Yeah, I thought the Mavs would put up more of a fight. I mean, again, it's 2 games in. Obviously, everything hangs on Game 3, whether the Mavs make this a series or not.
What's more interesting to me in the basketball world is Dan Hurley.
Oh, yeah.
Where's he going? Is he going anywhere?
Well, again, we're recording on our typical Monday afternoon spot, so by the time this drops on Tuesday, something could have happened. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I obviously, he's a terrific coach, but historically, college coaches have struggled to make the transition to the NBA.
Yep. Calipari.
Yeah. Pitino.
Oh yeah, Pitino struggled.
Yeah. So Boeheim from not Boeheim, Beilein, John Beilein from Michigan went to the Cavs, and that was a disaster.
That's right. What was he thinking?
Yeah,
that made zero sense.
I don't know. So I've seen quotes come out that indicate Hurley has expressed interest in going to the NBA at some point.
Yeah.
But my question just remains of typically the most successful college coaches are successful because they tend to be pretty high control.
Oh, yeah.
And they tend to be very much, this is my system. And if you don't like it, find somewhere else to play.
Yep.
That doesn't really work in the NBA.
Yeah.
You need to have a much broader kind of approach. And, the dynamic flips from the coach having all the power to the players having a lot of power in those situations. And especially, on top of that, you have LeBron James, who is the most sort of powerful player in the NBA still even. in terms of like how his team is expected, how his team runs and operates, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So, Dan Hurley's sort of my way or the highway can work in a college context, and he's been successful at it. That same exact approach is not going to work with grown men who make 15 times what he's going to make.
Yeah.
That's just not going to work.
Yeah. I read one story that Dan Hurley's really interested in the Knicks job someday, that he's really waiting for. Now, it's kind of a New York media does story about New York Knicks to get clicks, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, of the coaches in the NBA right now, and I am not an NBA expert, but Thibodeau seems to be the guy that has a system that he likes to run and tries to implement that.
Yes, but I do think there's a shelf life on that. I mean, I think he ran that shelf life through in Chicago, and I think he's going to reach a point where
the guys are sick and tired of that level of effort.
Yeah, I mean the trajectory is still on the upside for the Knicks right now, I think, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, they made the Eastern Conference semifinals, and if they weren't injured, they might win that series and get to the Eastern Conference finals.
Yep.
It is conceivable that you can see them making further progress into the playoffs.
Oh yeah.
But
for how many more years
exactly,
at that level of effort?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Thibodeau seems demanding enough that you're like, people just get tired of him, I think.
Yep. Now, he brought good basketball to the Knicks.
He did.
Which the Knicks have not had in 10 plus years.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's been really exciting.
Yeah. Do you think he ever smiles?
Great question. I'm sure he's human. He's capable.
I would think he has the necessary facial muscles to accomplish the task. Like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe if Julius Randle was healthy, he'd smile.
Maybe he would. So we'll see. If you force me to guess, I'm guessing that Hurley will not take the Lakers job.
I would stay at UConn if I were him.
Yeah. I mean,
what other job in college basketball would you take other than UConn if you're Dan Hurley?
None.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
None.
That's a good job.
It's a great job.
You have that whole Northeast market pretty much wrapped up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's massive.
In other sports news, this might be the most significant sports news
that isn't getting covered. Except
that isn't
here.
getting covered. Yes. The good old U.S. of A. managed to beat Pakistan in cricket.
Hey, go America.
#Murica, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I almost said democracy wins, but I don't even know what government Pakistan has, so it's hard for me to say that.
I don't know either. So, obviously, we have this sort of weird fascination with cricket, but lacking an understanding of cricket. But we do know that Pakistan is a major world power in cricket.
Oh, yeah.
And so
supposedly.
Yeah. And so for the United States to beat Pakistan is a colossal upset.
America should just be happy to be there in the cricket tournament at some level.
Yeah. So I looked up a little bit on this.
I know you have a source here.
This is from the BBC. So it's interesting to get an English perspective on this, not an American perspective.
There probably is. This is the American perspective on this.
It might be. There were some stories on CNN.
Okay.
Here's the BBC headline. Sensational upset awakens USA from 100-year cricketing hibernation.
That's one. Okay. So the British have a way with words that Americans just don't get.
Yeah.
And that'll be a part of my one thing I like this week, by the way.
Okay. Okay. Yes. So this is all really the story largely is a could this reawaken cricket? Apparently,
was cricket ever awake?
Well, that's the question.
Yeah.
They're basically 100 years ago. It's been in this 100-year hibernation. Was cricket really being played that much or that popular in 1924? I mean, basically, the argument is baseball killed cricket in the United States.
All right, but baseball's older than 1924. You would have
Correct.
to go back
It goes back to the 1860s, I think.
Yeah, you'd have to go to pre-Civil War for cricket.
Well, but
were they playing cricket then?
Yes, but in terms of within the U.S., I think my understanding is that cricket was being played in the U.S. Up into the early 20th century, and as baseball grew in popularity, it overtook cricket and put cricket to sleep for 100 years, according to this BBC article.
Wow.
And so now this is wondering whether this will be the reawakening of cricket in the United States.
Okay. I doubt it, but okay.
I doubt it as well. But I will say,
I love beating Pakistan. I'll tell you that much.
If it happens,
we were there.
We were
first.
again on the front edge of this. We were in front of this, just like we were with COVID.
Yeah.
Now we're on the front edge of the cricket revival in the United States.
Oh goodness!
In 20 years, when cricket is a big deal, people might look back at this event, this humble podcast, and say,
"Oh
man,
my,
they were on the cutting edge of cricket's
early adopters
reawakening within the United States." Yeah, so
love the idea.
Yeah, we'll be closely monitoring that. All right, a couple of other smaller items that I had on the list and just didn't get to last week. I assume you saw the story that the NFL is going to test out during the preseason electronic chains.
Yep, I love it.
Yeah, it's about time.
Finally. They've been talking about this for years.
Yeah.
They need to do when the football crosses the goal line too.
Yeah.
That needs to be electronic.
Yeah, but that's a different issue in terms of getting a chip. There's no reason why you can't implant a chip into a football.
Yep. Into the ends
Yeah.
of each football.
Yeah. Yeah. There's really no reason why you can't do that. Especially with as much money as is present in both in the NFL as well as college football. Both of those have enough money available to
and technology.
Yeah.
Technology companies in general
just
are very flush with cash.
Yeah. It's all a part of the it's probably the chain gang labor union that's
it probably is
holding this back. So
the pylon makers of America.
That's right. That's right. And then speaking of college football, there was a massive financial settlement with college football where players back as far as what was it? Was it 20? Oh gosh, I'm going to forget now. Is it 20?
I can't remember the year, but it's back a ways.
It's maybe it's 2014. Anyway, where players are going to be paid for their was this part of the EA Sport? Was this part of a video game settlement? I can't remember the specifics now.
I'm not sure.
Okay. So anyway, the ongoing professionalization of college football and thus making it worse.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate.
Well, here's my so this is going to be out of left field. I have a problem with not the transfer portal itself, but the beginning period of the transfer portal, which is after the regular season but before bowl games.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Why not just wait till after the national championship game to open up the portal?
Well, I think the argument is that especially now as the championship game gets pushed back further, it's like January 20th now will be the national title game.
Okay.
If a student wants to transfer to another school, they can't do it for that spring semester by then, typically, because spring semester has already started.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can't transfer and can't be a part of spring practices in football because the academic term has already begun and they can't make the transition.
Then they need to move up the national championship game to New Year's.
Well, it used to be that, yeah.
I mean, would that solve the problem? Probably not entirely.
Well,
that would week.
That would not.
Christmas Day.
It's all about the money.
Christmas Day. What a way to celebrate Christmas in America than with the national championship.
Well, the NFL is taking over Christmas Day.
They are.
Yeah.
They are.
They're
taking it from the NBA.
They're sticking it to the NBA. Yeah, for sure. One other sports note I didn't have on here because I don't think you want to talk about your Mets. Your Mets aren't something you want to talk about.
Well,
do you? If you do, it's fine.
I mean, they were in England this last week, over the weekend, but we could talk about that.
Okay, let me get this later. This one first. Have you seen any of the hubbub around Caitlin Clark being left off the women's Olympic team?
They awoke a monster, is what I've heard.
Yeah. So that whole Caitlin Clark thing, it is a fascinating thing.
Oh yeah.
There are so many dynamics going on there in terms of envy from a lot of the WNBA players, and some of them just living in an alternate reality. Like some of them, well, people come out to see us too. Well, sure, let's compare the average attendance for games with Caitlin Clark and the ones without. There was a game recently where a team had to they moved their game from their 4,200 seat arena to an 18,000 seat arena, and they filled it.
Yeah.
That's not happening with random WNBA players. That's happening with one WNBA player.
Hey, in a rising tide.
Yeah.
Rises all boats.
Yeah.
So run with it.
Yeah. Anyway.
But don't try to injure her or shove her to the ground or
dumb.
Yell expletives at her.
It's just dumb. All right. Tell me about your Mets. They were in England.
They were in England. They played 2 games in England. I have it for my one thing. So
okay, you're going to save it.
Yep, I'll save it.
All right, time now for us to move on to our discussion of our summer read, Patrick Schreiner, The Transfiguration of Christ. So we are in chapter 5 today. And that is, let me get the title here.
Transfiguration and Theology.
There you go. So really it's an attempt to kind of crystallize the so what of the Transfiguration. So, I'll start with you. What are some things that stood out to you from this chapter?
Well, I just really enjoyed throughout the book, really, but in this section particularly, the just sort of framework, this sort of reflection on how the Transfiguration engages with creation, how the Transfiguration engages with the Incarnation, and so on and so forth. I thought he made some great insights and some great connections that I don't think I would have naturally have made. I know, and I'm trying to. He goes into is it the apocalypse of Adam? Is that what he goes into at one point?
By way of comparison, or where?
Yeah. Yes, there it is. Creation.
I was past it.
The first large paragraph there, but I guess the third paragraph. He talks about, and it's sort of a jumping off point, talking about the apocalypse of Adam, Adam recounting his former Edenic glory, said they were like great eternal angels. And he uses this as a little bit of a jumping off point to the Transfiguration. I was just going, interesting. I always wonder what these extra biblical books and how much we engage with them. And I'm just curious your thoughts and feelings about the apocalypse of Adam.
Yeah.
And you immediately look at your watch to see how much time you have to spend on this.
Actually, I was turning down a phone call.
Oh, okay.
That would have interrupted the program. So, I mean, I think those kind of documents are something that help us understand the larger context in which the biblical authors write.
Yeah.
And so, it would be like, in one sense, this is not an exact parallel, but, if someone found Christian writings from this period of time and just had, let's say they found 25 or 30, popular level, maybe an occasional, more scholarly level Christian book. And then suddenly they also discovered issues of the New York Times or or found a television show clip or a series of clips that would help them understand, maybe the reason that they're talking about this in these Christian books is because the broader culture around them is talking about this. So I think it can help us draw some contrasts and comparisons. And more specifically with Jewish writings, I think what you end up getting is this is a closer context to what the biblical authors are working with, so that it does help you see, so there were Jewish writers who reflected on the relationship between Adam's former glory and what our ultimate destiny will be like. And that provides a jumping off point for us to compare that to the biblical picture that emerges. So, I do think that section in there about, regaining, sort of not just regaining, but going beyond Adam's initial glory, I do think is an important point. Because I do think some people –
Well, and he goes on to get out of the apocalypse of Adam and turns it to Moses' shining face on Sinai. And I think that's important, right? He says in there that the shining face of Moses was a restoration of God's image and likeness. And I was like, there's something about that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yes. But I will say eschatology points us to not just a restoration of that, but a going beyond that. That God's plan is not, I'm just going to get them back to the way Adam and Eve were in the garden. It's, I'm going to get them beyond where they were in the garden, because even in the garden itself, that was not intended as a final state. It was intended as an initial state of existence. So the Transfiguration helps us, as he points out, through both the incarnation. Well, through the incarnation, it points us to both the divine nature of Jesus, but also the glorified human nature of Jesus and what we will share in as a result of our union with Christ.
Yeah. No, that's good.
He also does a lot with, and one of the things I appreciate about Patrick's writing is he has a number of helpful charts that just summarize clearly.
Very good with the charts.
Kind of similarities and contrasts between things. He draws parallels between the Transfiguration and the baptism, which are pretty obvious given what is said from heaven.
Yeah.
But also with Gethsemane, which I think tends to be a little bit less noticed in terms of parallels there, as well as parallels and contrast to the cross, and also, well, then he talks about the resurrection. But I think what that does is that I think it helps him to solidify and enhance his case that the Transfiguration is not this sort of like weird one-off kind of event.
Yeah.
Like it is embedded within a narrative and it has a purpose. And I think part of what I remember what he starts off with in the introduction, he often says that the Transfiguration is treated as if it's this almost like one-off event that's like, well, that was weird.
Yeah.
And what was that about? And not help and not people not seeing connections between the other key points of the storyline that we're much more familiar with in terms of like, oh, that's really important. His baptism's crucial, or his time in the garden is crucial, or his time on the cross and all those things are crucial. Yes. And so actually is the Transfiguration because it's connected to those events.
Yeah.
So anything else in this section? Next week we will discuss the conclusion. But anything else in here?
I don't think so. This has been really helpful. I've enjoyed Patrick's writing a lot, and am excited to talk to him in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Should be a rip-roaring good time.
Yes. So next week, conclusion and appendix. Don't forget the appendix.
Are we doing Light from Light?
Yes.
Is that the article there? Okay.
Yes. So we'll do that.
And it's appendix, not appendices, right? It's
Well,
just
there's
appendix.
just one. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
An appendix.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said appendix.
It'd be an. Yeah.
An appendix.
Yeah. Just like the human body comes equipped with one appendix, not appendices. Yeah. Patrick has modeled his book after the human body.
Yeah. Interesting.
There you go. All right, John, let's move on now to talk for the last time in this series. I'm not saying we'll never talk about
never
the
do it
English
again.
Reformation
Yeah.
again. But so here we are, part 4 of our discussion of the English Reformation. Why don't you remind us where we left off at the end of the previous episode?
Well, so in the last episode we talked about Edward taking the throne.
Edward.
The glorious king child as he was, and reigning with a Protestant fist, so to speak.
Yeah.
And his privy council really ruling in his stead, made up of tons and tons of Protestants.
Yeah.
And
a classic Christian nationalist.
Yeah. Gosh.
See what I did there?
Yeah. And then
You're just going to move on.
I am. And then he dies at 16 from tuberculosis, so does that comment. And his very Catholic sister, Mary Tudor.
Yeah, Mary.
Also known as Bloody Mary.
Yeah, such a Mary.
She has a tough life. I think that's a safe way to put it. As tough as a life as royalty can have.
So you're going to excuse her bad behavior because of her upbringing.
That's a strong implication. Okay. I don't think I'm going to excuse. I think I'm going to nuance.
I see. I think contextualize is the
contextualize, yes. But anyway, I believe we killed her off.
Yeah, we did.
In our last.
Yeah, we were waiting to get to Elizabeth here. So.
We're still not totally sure what killed Mary. We're pretty sure it was stomach cancer, but
right because she thought she was pregnant
multiple times.
Multiple times, yeah.
And she dies with no heir. Interestingly enough, her Spanish relatives urged her to kill her sister Elizabeth, who was more Protestant and locked in the Tower of London, all those things. And but Mary never killed her, and so Mary Tudor dies.
Yeah,
and Elizabeth rises to the throne in 1558.
Was there any nickname that she went by? Was it just strictly Elizabeth? I mean, because Elizabeth has a lot of potential nicknames.
I think it was just Queen Elizabeth. I mean,
Lizzie, Beth, Betty, Liza.
She went by Glorious One.
Okay. I guess that's better than any of the...
Virgin Queen is another one I'm sure you've heard of.
Okay.
When you think of this Queen Elizabeth, not the most recent Queen Elizabeth, but this Queen Elizabeth, what do you think of? Like, what comes to mind? Because she rules for a long, long time, like 1558 to 1603.
Yeah, that's a long time.
That's a lot of time on the throne.
I mean, she I would assume that if people have an association, it's because this was when Shakespeare was active.
Yes. So very, what do you call that, Victorian England? Is that what it is? Yeah. So she's basically the crown throughout Victorian England. A number of significant things happen while she's queen. So Shakespeare's going on. The Spanish Armada. Are you familiar with this? 1588, I believe. The Spanish had this amazing navy, and so they sailed the Armada against the English navy.
Yeah.
And this storm rises up and destroys the Armada, and the King of Spain says, I sent my ships against man vessels or whatever, and they ran into God along the way or something like that.
Massive upset.
Huge. I mean, we're talking America
USA,
over Pakistan. And she's also known as I mentioned earlier, the Virgin Queen. So she would use her marriage as basically a chess piece for England, and to get things she wants, she'd break off engagements. She'd do this again and again and again, and entertaining proposals in order to get England what it wants and needs. Never married, interestingly enough, which of course led to no children either.
Which this is going to go. That's beyond the scope of our series, but I'm assuming that's going to cause problems in England.
Yes,
because when there's no obvious heir to the throne, all sorts of bad things tend to happen.
Yes, I mean we could go on to King James and continue up the, we go right through New Model Army and the English Reformation, the English Revolution, but right up to the Glorious Revolution. However, she comes onto the throne, and she has Catholics, she has Protestants vying for her desires, and she says, "We're going to make a middle way. We're going to split this down the middle. We are going to be a Protestant church, but we're going to have the look of a Catholic one," which virtually makes no one happy,
right?
And so you have to this day what we know as the Anglican Church, and kind of how it forms and functions, right? It has the funny garbs, the fancy churches, the candles, the singing of the Gregorian chantness of a Catholic service. However, their doctrine's pretty Protestant.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, now there's some wackos out there, sure, but for the most part, they have Protestant theology.
Yes, according to their documents.
According to their founding documents, yes.
Yes.
They are absolutely Protestant. And so this becomes known as the Elizabethan Compromise. And the Catholics obviously aren't happy because they don't get their doctrine. And the Protestants aren't happy because they're about their doctrine and they want it to look the way they want it to. Right. Which gives rise to Puritanism.
Yeah.
So during this time throughout England, if you remember, we put when Mary comes to the throne, all those English Protestants fled to Switzerland. They now have returned, and I don't know a better way to put this, but they've sort of been riled up there. They're outside of their home. They've gotten frustrated. They're a little bit angsty, and they come back, and they get this like half measure from Elizabeth, and they're not happy about it.
No,
and they're not happy about it for a long time, and that really becomes known as the Puritans.
Yeah,
and eventually they're like so frustrating to English society, and this is going way down the line. But they go, the Crown looks at them and goes, "Get the heck out of here!"
Yeah,
and they end up in the United States.
There you go.
What becomes the United States? Just fascinating. Anyway, there's several plots against Elizabeth's life. She's assassination attempts throughout. There's a Catholic uprising that takes place. There's a few Catholic uprisings that take place, and she kills 1,000 people in a matter of days.
But she's never known as Bloody Elizabeth.
No. She kills. I believe the numbers are roughly the same between her and Mary. However, Mary reigns for 7 years, 8 years, something like that, and Elizabeth reigns for 50.
So Mary was a much more efficient.
She was a very efficient murderer.
Yes.
During this time, also our good friend John Knox comes on the scene.
Yeah.
So he's kind of the archetype of this guy in Switzerland who's getting all jazzed and riled up. Looked back at the time of Edward fondly, but saw it as not going far enough. And during this time writes one of the perhaps worst titled books of all time. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
So as Mary's on the throne, he writes this book against Mary Tudor. I believe there's another Mary in Scotland that's on the throne, and maybe another one in Spain, another woman on the throne. And he says, goodness, I really hate that all these women are in power and are all Catholic. And so he writes the book entitled, and I think it has a couple of titles, but this is the one I found, First Blast Against the Monstrous Regiment of Women.
Which would seem to imply that there are subsequent blasts coming, right?
Yes. So he does this. Mary Tudor dies. Elizabeth comes on the throne. And all of a sudden his book is everywhere. And Elizabeth's unhappy about this.
Yeah.
Particularly because John won't recant.
That's not the way that John worked.
Calvin's coming to him going like, dude, listen, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And he refuses to listen. He's barred from England. I don't believe he ever returns. Goes to Scotland as part of the Scottish Reformation then.
Last summer, I was in Edinburgh and saw the church where he ministered.
Were
and
you?
His house, yeah.
Oh, wow. What was that like?
It was nice, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that the cathedral where he was, where he served, like you really today had to work to find where the statue of Knox was.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, like it's there, but it's not prominent.
Is that a historical problem with Scotland that they're ashamed of this?
I think that'd be my guess.
And is it – how long have they been ashamed?
I don't know about historical. I think it's probably a reflection of the values of that current cathedral and that church today.
Okay.
Not the Church of Scotland in general, but like that church. That parish.
Would they call it a parish?
I
was
so.
about to do the same thing, and
so.
I wasn't sure. Okay. And this really kicks off what becomes Puritanism, which again we said moves us eventually to the Pilgrims and Jamestown and all these things. So yeah, that's kind of how we ended up with English Reformation, and it, like I said in the first episode, it's just weird.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not the German, it's not the Lutheran Reformation, where like, he's writing all this material and convincing hearts and minds and, using bathroom humor to attack people. It's basically like King Henry going like, yeah, I want that. And then his daughter going, no, I don't like it. And then his other daughter going, yes. And it's state controlled. It's very much a top down sort of thing. It's not a bottom up Reformation like in other cultures,
right?
And
it feels like, in some ways, in contrast to some of the other parts of Europe where this is happening, it is much more of a pragmatic and political form of Reformation. Not that there was no pragmatics or politics involved in other places. Of course there were. But it tended to be, especially with this sort of the emergence of this middle way, that as we noted, almost nobody ended up happy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Although the English learned to love it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're there's still a good number of Anglicans today.
Well, it is the state church of England.
Yeah. Do you remember going to that evening song?
Yeah.
When we were in Westminster?
Yeah.
What a wild scene. I remember when they specifically start praying for the king by name, the queen at that time by name, her sons, their offspring. It was just a little wild where I'm like, this does not happen in an American church. Like, this is not something we do. And it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's I mean, when I was there again, I was there twice last summer in London, and both times went to an evensong service at St. Paul's Cathedral.
Oh, you went to St. Paul's? Interesting.
And same thing. Praying for the king, which was just wild. From an American perspective.
Yeah, yeah, but. Yeah, the English Reformation is just a little quirky.
It is.
Just a little weird.
It is. Yeah. And then, of course, as you mentioned, many of the Puritans, once they eventually kind of wore out their welcome in their own homeland, end up coming to the United States.
Well, and they took over Parliament for a long time.
Right. Middle of the 17th century, right? Like 1640s,
they had controlled the purse
somewhere.
strings.
Yeah.
Had the New Model Army.
Yeah. So
there's a great podcast about that, by the way.
well, it's just fascinating that and this might get into an area that you're less comfortable talking about. So we'll tread lightly. But
I'm nervous. Yeah.
you have these Puritans who end up coming to what eventually becomes the United States,
Sure.
and they begin establishing churches and towns and that sort of thing. And then by the time the American Revolution comes around, you've got that strong Puritan influence, you also have this strong interest in no state church, none whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so you have very clearly defined structures put in place that there's not going to be an official religion of the United States, which, in retrospect, I think was a very smart move from a political and pragmatic perspective, of course. But and now, of course, it's fascinating that you have a segment. We can debate how large this segment is of people who would like to see essentially the establishment of Christianity as the official and only legitimate religion within the United States.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, just it's fascinating how these things tend to ebb and flow throughout history when viewed from a very long perspective.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
all right. Time now for This Day in Sports History.
This day in sports history, June 11th,
Yeah.
2024.
Summer's almost over, John.
Yeah, pretty much. 1974, Mel Stottlemyre
Yeah, good job.
sets an American League record by making his 272nd consecutive start without pitching a game in relief.
Yeah, I think that was just more common. Obviously, today things are so much different in terms of like specialization.
Sure, everybody's specialized. Yeah. 1977, the 109th Belmont, Jean Cruget?
Sure.
Okay. Riding Seattle Slew, that I know, wins in 2 minutes and 29.6 seconds.
Yep. Which would have been the final
Leg of the triple.
leg of the Triple Crown.
Yeah. 1978, 1 year later, French Open men's tennis, Sweden's Bjorn Borg.
Bjorn.
Goodness, I've heard that pronounced 1,000 times. Wins his third French title, beats Guillermo Villas
Guillermo Villas.
of Argentina. I'm not going to do the matches, but he dominated them.
Yes.
1983, Zhu Jianhu?
Jianhu maybe, or Yianhu. I can't remember if the J has a Y sound in Chinese. I can't remember.
Of China sets a new world record in high jump, clearing 2.37 meters at a meet in Beijing, setting a new world record. He would go on to beat his own record twice, reaching 2.38 and then 2.39, the latter on June 10th, 1980, so a day prior, 1984, at a meet in West Germany in the build-up to the LA Games.
Yes, I think that's like 7 foot 10 inches, 11
Wow.
inches, somewhere around there.
Wow. It's funny to read, like, they were building up to the Los Angeles Olympics. I think we're getting ready to have another Olympics in Los Angeles here in 4 years. Very excited for the Paris Olympics, by the way, this summer.
Yeah. Yes.
And mid-July.
Is it mid-July? Maybe late.
Late July. I think that's right.
Yeah. We actually, we know someone who is potentially going to qualify.
Yeah,
for the Olympics.
still to run.
Yeah.
Still to run. I believe somebody Andrea went to high school with, my wife went to high school with, has qualified.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah. 1990, Nolan Ryan pitches his 6th no-hitter, beating Oakland. In the 9th, he retires Ken Phelps, Ricky Henderson, and Willie Randolph, all ex-Yankees.
That brings a smile to your face.
It sure does.
6 no-hitters. And he was like in his 40s at that point.
Yeah. So yesterday, at a church, I gave an update on Grace College and Seminary to this congregation in Fort Wayne. And the pastor introduced me as not a Yankees fan, but a Mets fan. And he goes, if he rooted for the Yankees, he'd be rooting for a first-place team.
Okay,
This
shot.
This gentleman was a Yankee. And he went on for a couple of minutes of some, it was 2 minutes of Mets hate. And I had to get up there and return fire a little bit. Said something about the Yankees could not fulfill what the National League could fulfill for the city of New York. Anyway, 2022, Charles Schwartzel, I don't know, hangs on to beat fellow South African Heaney du Plessis, I have no clue, by a stroke to win the inaugural Live Golf Invitational event at the Centurion Golf Course in Hertfordshire. Pockets massive $4.75 million in U.S. dollars for the win.
Yeah, the live golf folks just dropping truckloads of money on people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. So out of that, John, who do you like?
Man, maybe Nolan Ryan. I know we've had Nolan Ryan before. Who do you like? Do you like Nolan?
I always like Nolan. Did you see? Have you seen the? I probably talked about this in the pod, but there's like
a Netflix documentary. Right?
Is it Netflix? I can't remember where it's on, but like it's really good.
Yeah,
just telling his life story, and he was a stud. We can go with Nolan again. That's fine.
Okay,
Nolan Ryan. It is. One thing you liked.
All right. So this past weekend, the Mets split a 2-game series with the Phillies in London.
Okay.
So they played in London, which is just wild as baseball tries to globalize itself. And
baseball is global in the sense that it has not penetrated Europe. But I mean, it's big in Japan, obviously.
Korea.
It's big in Korea. It's big in the Caribbean.
South America.
Yeah, like just hasn't hit Europe yet.
So they did this Pack Stadium as a soccer stadium that they converted to a baseball field. But what they did that was nice, what I believe ESPN did yesterday morning when this game was played, they had the British baseball announcer do the game.
All right.
And it was the bottom of the ninth. Mets were up 1 run, and there was the bases loaded with 1 out.
So they're up 1, but Phillies have the bases loaded.
That's right.
1 out. Okay.
And Castellanos, who plays for the Phillies, broke his bat and hit a dribbler. I mean, it went 3 feet.
Yeah.
The catcher runs out, picks up the ball, tags home, and throws to first for the game-ending double play.
Right.
The British announcer, I can't even begin to say how good of a call it was. It was incredible. And I'll link it in the show notes for listeners.
Okay.
But it was beautiful. There's also a sneaky dirty play where the guy coming in for third takes out the catcher. And
I didn't think that was allowed anymore.
Yeah, like takes out his leg and he comes up limping afterward. But the British broadcaster who called it was phenomenal.
Yeah. We also might need to throw a link into the highlights for the cricket match.
We could do that.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
The BBC one here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay. My one thing I liked is, so I mentioned in the last episode there was a couples shower for my son Jake and his fiancee Autumn. And so in this last week, Kate's parents stuck around. And so they hung out with us for the last week or so. And so that was a lot of fun. They're getting older.
Mm-hmm.
She is 84. He is 89. Yes, and so it's interesting just to sit and talk with them, and that's all her dad wants to do. Just sit and talk. But he's an interesting guy. But just fun to spend time with them since we don't get to see them a ton since they live out in Omaha. But yeah.
Nice.
And we had some breaking news here on the podcast.
Dan Hurley turned down the Lakers.
Yeah.
Dum, 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 dum.
There you go. Not surprised. Do you think J.J. Redick gets that job?
Yeah, I think there's a strong chance he gets that job. I like J.J. Redick.
Yeah, but he has no coaching experience.
That's kind of the trend, though, is to hire these guys with little to no experience.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Isn't LeBron really your coach at that point?
Yeah. Probably. Who knows? Anyway. All right. That is our one thing we liked. All right, John, we have talked about kittens.
We have.
That's a first on the podcast.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
We have talked about Patrick Schreiner, the Transfiguration of Christ. Next week, we'll wrap up our individual discussion of chapters with the conclusion and the appendix. We finished up our discussion of the English Reformation, focusing on good old Betsy, Beth, Lizzie, Eliza, Elizabeth, and wondered why she's not called Bloody Elizabeth in light of her body count. We talked about Nolan Ryan. We talked about the Mets in London. We talked about the Hudson family in town. So I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. So
we have.
All that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless you all real good.
Later.